Okay, real quick, before I start my main point of this video, I want to address a knee-jerk reaction I'm sure a good amount of people will have. This video is not at all an attack on the use of hacked rare candies in Nuzlocke runs. In fact, I believe that in just about 90% of all scenarios, the use of infinite candies will do nothing but benefit the experience of a modern-day Nuzlocker. I personally use these things all the time. Here's me right here in a run and bun attempt. I have over 100 attempts at this game. I have not gotten past Winona Split. Basically, this is just to let you all know that I'm not just some fist-shaking outsider who doesn't want their precious, wondrous adventure tarnished by sweaty tryhards. Candies are a massive time saver, uses that save time to progress more in your run as well as plan out fights more optimally, and most importantly, doesn't provide the player with any advantage that they wouldn't currently have had they simply grinded their Pokemon in the safest way possible, which is usually just training on the first route. Speaking of grinding, man, it really sucks, doesn't it? They take no brain power, eats up hours of your day just mindlessly pressing A against the same mon over and over. Oftentimes your reward for all that grinding is at most 2 important battles before you have to grind all over again, and if you god forbid try and grind on stronger Pokemon to make the process go faster, you could get punished by a random event that kills the mon you're grinding up because you weren't paying attention for 3 whole hours staring at your screen, which means you need to grind up a whole new Pokemon for even more time than before. How could anyone possibly find this obviously outdated, boring as molasses trade of RPGs at all desirable, investing, enjoyable, or something that has any merits over candies other than your Pokemon gaining negligible, most of the time non-optimal EVs? Oh god, this is where it cuts to the title card, isn't it? I feel like it's necessary to properly explain just what makes grinding so hated amongst the Pokemon, specifically Nuzlocking community. And you can narrow it down to 2 main points. And those are that it takes too long, and it's not fun. If you were playing as optimally as possible, you would grind your Pokemon on the least threatening wild encounters possible, usually ones that are a very low level, so as to minimize the chances of your Pokemon dying during a grinding session. The end result, therefore, is potentially hours upon hours, perhaps days, of running around in the grass, getting a random encounter, killing that encounter, gaining a minuscule amount of XP, and repeating the process until every Pokemon you have available to you is at a satisfactory level, usually the level cap, with the time spent only compounding as the game demands higher and higher levels from you the further in you go. These 2 cases against grinding go hand in hand, and they, I hope to most of you watching, are completely fair and reasonable arguments. When you're playing a challenge run where every single Pokemon in your limited selection has a stake in a playthrough that, unlike traditional ones, has a real lose condition, having to do what amounts to general busy work in order to play the parts of the game you're most likely to care about is going to be pretty fairly ridiculed. Adding on to this, in the advent of Jaden's Nuzlocke video, or more specifically P-Chow's reaction to it that brought pro-Nuzlocking into the forefront, a flood of creators wanted to throw their hat into the new hip thing to do in Pokemon. And would they rather show their potentially tens of thousands of viewers hours of mindless filler, or the whole rest of the game? In the very probable chance they choose the latter, rare candies are the perfect logical solution to the problem. But what if the problem wasn't a problem at all? What happens if instead of removing this needless roadblock, you face it? I think a lot of us who've been around in the pre-Jaden era of Nuzlocks have noticed a distinct shift in how the challenge is played nowadays. The topic of old versus new Nuzlocking is something almost entirely separate, so I'll keep this brief. In the modern era, the Nuzlocke challenge is seen as just that, a challenge that needs to be completed. And the Pokemon used in that challenge are more so a means to complete that challenge, much more than anything else. Sure, it'd be nice if an emotional attachment was formed with one of your mons, maybe out of a clutch play or sweeping through an otherwise hard fight, but that's not necessary in the vein of, you will help me finish my run. This mindset shift has a multitude of different underlying factors, but I think there's a reason to believe that the normalization of candies has a role to play in it. By making your Pokemon jump levels in a matter of a minute when you use candies on speed up, you heavily cut down on one of the key parts in bonding with your Pokemon, and that's spending time with them. leveling up your Pokemon via grinding takes significantly more time than using candies. That time is spent, however, with your Pokemon. The more time you spend with your Pokemon, the more invested you're likely to get in those Pokemon, and therefore the more invested you get into the game when those Pokemon are in important battles or intense moments, reaching an all-time high when they're close to or have reached their death. Another part of the experience people talk down on is after spending so long grinding up that Pokemon, it dies 1 or 2 battles in. Or worse yet, if you grind on later routes, it dies in the middle of, or at the end of the session, to a random wild encounter. This can play further into your investment of the run. This can be a good thing, I swear. Let's set up an analogy. Say you're training a dog for some sort of contest, an agility one for example. You burn months of time getting them up to snuff in as best of shape as you can muster up for the contest. You bring them in and it does really bad. Bad enough to even make you feel a bit dejected. This is where you come across a crossroads. Do you give up on going to more contests, or do you dedicate yourself more to it and train up more for the next one? If you and your dog do really well for the contest, the gratification you get would probably be even greater than if you had just rented an already fully trained dog. At least that's what I think. Or, even better, let's say you're training up a dog for some sort of contest, an agility one for example. You burn months of time getting them up to snuff in as best of shape as you can muster up for the contest. But when you're crossing the road with your dog on the way to the contest, a truck driven by a drunk driver rams over your dog and kills them in the blink of an eye. Most people would feel quite upset about this, at the fact they have a less likely chance to win the contest, that they likely won't be able to attend the contest, and also that their dog is dead. If they had rented a fully trained dog the day of the contest, one they spent minimal time training, and then it got ran over by a truck, the amount that they would be upset would still certainly be high, but likely not as high as if they had trained that dog for months, with the key difference being the amount of time they had spent training it and bonding with it, directly translating to how emotionally invested they were in that dog. Candied Pokemon are those rented dogs. This level of sadness can mean different things for different people. It can either be a deterrent and drive someone to quit,
oh shit, I spaced out, what?
Or it can be fuel for someone to push forward with their goals, to surmount this mountain that appeared in front of them. The point I'm trying to make here is that, while yes, it certainly does suck a ton to lose a Pokemon after spending so long grinding, if you're later able to win that run past that, for some, that win would be even more satisfying than if they had cut that grinding time by using candies. A quote, smoking gun argument that some people have against grinding is that candied runs allows users to actually play the game. I think this statement is pretty disingenuous to how different people see the game as well. For some, the actual game is a tactical puzzle as you figure out the safest lines to navigate through difficult fights, and grinding just gets in the way of that. For others, grinding is indeed part of that actual game. Spending hours watching your Pokemon slowly grow from small, weak critters to competent, capable units of battle can be endearing in a sense. Kinda like raising your own personal pet, a dog for an agility contest if you will, which for some could be Pokemon's entire appeal. Nuzlocks are just a mean to make the emotional attachment to those pets even greater, with the looming risk of losing them forever. Nowadays, the world of rare candies, the candy pill if you will, has pretty comfortably become worldwide in the Nuzlocke community, with many players choosing, rightfully so, to better optimize their gaming experience, cutting out the fluff so that they can get to the more exciting parts easier, being the intense boss fights and planning for said boss fights. However, whenever a documentation of someone's run comes out, whether that be a video, a social media post, or a webcomic, and there's a distinct lack of candies, chances are they've got their own reason why that is. And I think that's pretty cool.
Alright, enough of that, onto Museum Split I go, bitch!